The galaxy had seen war before, countless times in fact. Empires rose and fell like waves crashing against a jagged shore, leaving behind ruins and whispers of glory. The Kavren Dominion had crushed the insectoid swarms of the Zithar expanse. The Telleri Collective had outmaneuvered the crystalline fleets of the Vakshun. Everyone knew the rules. Power ruled, mercy was weakness, and survival was a game of cold calculation. But nothing had prepared them for the humans. It started with a ripple, a faint tremor in the void. The Dominion's long-range sensors picked it up first, a blip so massive it overloaded the arrays. The analysts scoffed at the readings. A glitch, they said. A ship that size couldn't exist. The laws of physics wouldn't allow it. But then the Telleri confirmed it, their psionic relays screaming with static as something tore through the fabric of hyperspace. The Vakshuan went silent, their crystalline minds fracturing under the weight of what they'd glimpsed. By the time the first visuals came through, the galaxy's mightiest powers were already trembling. The ship was a monster. A jagged, blackened behemoth, its hull scarred with the burns of 1,000 battles, its silhouette a brutal defiance of elegance. It didn't glide like the Telleri cutters, or shimmer like the Vakshuan prisms. It lumbered, a predator too big to care about stealth, too strong to bother with grace. The Dominion called it an abomination. The Telleri whispered of a god's wrath made manifest. But the humans? They called it retribution. Admiral Kyle Tor of the Kavren Dominion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Claw, staring at the holoscreen. His mandibles clicked in agitation, his 4 eyes narrowing as the human vessel filled the display. Around him, his officers chittered nervously, their claws tapping against consoles. The retribution hung there in the void, silent and unyielding, dwarfing the Dominion's entire battle group. Its weapons weren't even powered up, not yet, but the sheer presence of it was enough to make Kale Tor's blood run cold. "Open a channel," he barked, his voice steady despite the dread coiling in his gut. "Demand their intent." The comms officer hesitated, her claws trembling. "Sir, they're not responding to standard hails. They're broadcasting something else." "Put it through," Kale Tor snapped. The bridge fell silent as the human transmission crackled to life. It wasn't a voice. Not at first. It was a sound, low and guttural, like the rumble of a dying star. Then came the words, spoken in a tongue the Dominion's translators barely grasped. The voice was deep, raw, and laced with something Kale Tor couldn't name. Anger, yes, but also sorrow, a wound that refused to heal. "This is Admiral Elena Voss of the United Earth Coalition. You took our worlds. You burned our cities. You thought us broken. You were wrong." Kale Tor's mandibles froze mid-click. The humans. He'd heard of them. Everyone had. A primitive species from a backwater system, barely worth the effort of conquest. The Dominion had raided their colonies decades ago, glassing a few planets for resources and leaving the rest to rot. The Telleri had called it a mercy to let them fade into obscurity. The Vakshuan had dismissed them as insignificant. But this was no broken remnant. This was vengeance given form. "Scan it," Kale Tor ordered, his voice tight. "Find a weakness." The sensor officer's claws danced over the controls, but his report came back laced with panic. "Sir, its hull. It's layered with an alloy we can't identify. Energy signatures suggest weapons capable of cracking a planet. And there's something else. It's carrying smaller craft. Thousands of them." Kyle Tor stared at the screen, his mind racing. Thousands of fighters. No fleet in the galaxy could deploy that many. The Dominion's largest carriers topped out at a few hundred. The Retribution wasn't just a ship. It was a war machine, a floating fortress built to drown its enemies in blood. "Raise shields," he said, forcing calm into his tone. "Signal the fleet. Prepare for..." He didn't finish. The Retribution moved. Not fast, not graceful, but with a terrible inevitability. Its forward batteries flared to life, a cascade of crimson light that painted the void in hues of death. The first shot didn't hit the Eternal Claw. It didn't need to. It struck the Dominion's supply frigate, a vessel half a light second away, and turned it into a cloud of molten debris. The shockwave rattled Kyle Tor's flagship, and the bridge erupted in chaos. "Return fire!" he roared, but even as the order left his mouth, he knew it was futile. The Retribution didn't flinch. It didn't slow. It advanced, relentless, a storm of steel and fury bearing down on them all. And in that moment, Kyle Tor understood. The galaxy had underestimated the humans. They hadn't just survived. They'd endured. They'd forged their pain into a weapon, their grief into a blade. The Retribution wasn't here to negotiate or conquer. It was here to punish. The galaxy stood frozen in fear, and the humans were just getting started. The Eternal Claw shuddered as another volley from the Retribution tore through the Dominion's outer perimeter. Kyle Tor gripped the edge of his command throne, his claws digging into the polished obsidian. The holoscreen flickered with static, struggling to keep up with the carnage unfolding beyond the viewport. One moment, the frigate Iron Fang was there, its shields flaring defiantly. The next, it was gone, vaporized in a bloom of plasma so bright it seared the shadows from the bridge. "Status!" Kyle Tor bellowed, his voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms. "Shields at 60%, the tactical officer rasped, her mandibles trembling. "The fleet's down to 7 ships. Their weapons. They're cutting through us like we're nothing." Kyle Tor's mind raced, grasping for a strategy, a shred of hope. The Dominion had faced overwhelming odds before. They'd crushed the Zithar swarms through sheer numbers, outlasted the Vaxuan through cunning. But this was no battle. It was an execution. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to erase. "Focus fire on their forward section," he ordered, forcing his voice steady. "If we can breach their hull—" "Sir, we've tried," the weapons officer interrupted, his tone bordering on insubordination. "Our plasma lances barely scratch it. Their armor, it's regenerating. I don't know how, but it's healing faster than we can damage it." Kyle Tor's eyes widened, a chill sinking into his bones. Regenerating armor? That was impossible. The Dominion's finest metallurgists couldn't dream of such technology. Yet there it was, the Retribution shrugging off their best efforts like a beast shaking water from its hide. He opened his mouth to bark another command, but the comms crackled again, cutting him off. Admiral Elena Voss's voice filled the bridge once more, cold and unyielding, a blade wrapped in velvet. "You thought us weak because we bled. You thought us finished because we fell silent. But silence isn't surrender. It's the calm before the storm." The transmission cut out, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum that pulsed through the Eternal Claw's hull. Kyle Tor's officers exchanged frantic glances, their claws twitching. Then the hum grew louder, deeper, until it rattled the deck beneath their feet. The holoscreen zoomed in on the Retribution's midsection, where hatches were sliding open, hundreds of them, thousands, spilling forth a swarm of smaller craft like locusts from a hive. "Fighters," the sensor officer whispered, her voice breaking. "They're launching fighters." Kyle Tor stared, his mandibles slack. The human ships were tiny compared to the Retribution, but they moved with a ferocity that defied their size. They darted through the void, weaving between Dominion vessels, their weapons spitting streams of kinetic rounds and plasma bolts. One of the Eternal Claw's escorts, the Shadow Talon, tried to intercept them. It lasted less than a minute. The fighters swarmed it, tearing through its shields, punching holes in its hull until it erupted in a silent fireball. "Deploy our drones!" Kyle Tor roared, slamming a claw against his throne. "Meet them head on!" The Dominion drones launched, a cloud of sleek, beetle-like machines designed to overwhelm through numbers. But the human fighters didn't falter. They danced through the chaos, outmaneuvering the drones with a precision that bordered on unnatural. Kale Tor watched, helpless as his forces dwindled. The Retribution loomed closer, its shadow swallowing the stars, its main guns charging for another devastating strike. On the Retribution's bridge, Elena Voss stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back. The command deck was a stark contrast to the Dominion's opulent chaos. Sparse, utilitarian, every surface etched with the scars of a people who'd clawed their way back from oblivion. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces hard, their eyes burning with a shared purpose. She didn't need to shout orders. They knew what this was. They'd lived it. "Target their flagship," she said, her voice low but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Let them feel what we felt." Her first officer, a grizzled man named Reyes, nodded. His left arm was a prosthetic, a reminder of the colony he'd lost to the Dominion's fire. "Main cannon's ready, ma'am. One shot'll crack it wide open." Elena's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Good. Fire when ready." Back on the Eternal Claw, Kale Tor felt the shift before he saw it. The air grew heavy, the lights dimming as if the ship itself sensed its doom. The holoscreen flared red, a warning blaring. Incoming energy surge. He didn't have time to react. The Retribution's cannon unleashed its fury, a beam of light so intense it burned through the void, slamming into the Eternal Claw's shields. The barriers held for a heartbeat, then shattered like glass. The bridge exploded into chaos. Consoles sparked, officers screamed, and the deck buckled as the beam carved through the ship's core. Kyle Tor was thrown from his throne, his body slamming into the wall. Pain seared through him, but he forced himself to his feet, blood dripping from a gash above his eye. Through the fractured viewport, he saw it. The Retribution, implacable, unstoppable, a monument to humanity's rage. And then the second shot came. The second shot didn't just hit the Eternal Claw, it gutted it. The beam tore through the flagship's midsection, splitting armor and superstructure like a knife through flesh. Atmosphere vented into the void, dragging debris and bodies with it. Kyle Tor clung to a jagged railing, his claws scraping against the metal as the ship groaned around him. The bridge was a graveyard of flickering lights and broken consoles, the air thick with smoke and the coppery tang of blood. His officers were scattered, some dead, some dying, their mandibles twitching in silent agony. "Report!" he rasped, his voice hoarse over the wail of emergency klaxons. No one answered. The comms officer lay slumped over her station, a shard of metal jutting from her chest. The tactical officer was gone, sucked out through a breach in the hull. Kyle Tor stumbled to the nearest console, his vision swimming, and punched in a command. The holoscreen flickered to life, patchy and distorted, but it showed enough. The Eternal Claw was crippled, its engines offline, its weapons silent. Beyond it, the Dominion fleet was in tatters, half the ships reduced to drifting husks, the rest fleeing in disarray. And there, at the center of it all, was the Retribution. It hung in the void like a dark omen, its fighters swarming the survivors, picking them off with ruthless precision. Kyle Tor's mandibles clicked weakly, a sound of disbelief. This wasn't war, this was annihilation. "Reroute power to the distress beacon," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need reinforcements. The High Council must know." A shadow fell over the console, and he turned to see his second-in-command, Vrakesh, staggering toward him. Her left arm hung useless, dripping ichor, but her eyes burned with defiance. "The beacon's gone, Admiral. They hit it first. We're alone." Kale Tor's gut twisted. Alone. The word echoed in his skull, heavy and final. The Dominion had never been alone, not in 1,000 cycles. Their fleet spanned systems, their allies feared and respected them. But now, facing this human juggernaut, he felt the weight of isolation for the first time. The galaxy wasn't coming to save them. The galaxy was watching, holding its breath. Aboard the Retribution, Elena Voss stared at the tactical display, her face a mask of cold resolve. The Dominion flagship was a wreck, its hull bleeding fire and gas, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. She could still see the footage in her mind. Earth's colonies burning, the skies choked with ash, the screams of millions silenced by alien indifference. The Dominion hadn't cared then. They'd taken what they wanted and left the rest to rot. Now it was their turn to feel helpless. "Status on their fleet?" she asked, her voice steady. Reyes glanced at his console, his prosthetic hand tapping a rhythm of barely contained fury. "Scattered. A few are trying to jump to hyperspace, but our fighters are cutting them off. They won't make it." "Good," Elena said, her eyes narrowing. "Target the stragglers. No survivors." Reyes hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Ma'am, some of those ships are signaling surrender. We could—" "No," she cut him off, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. "They don't get mercy. Not after what they did. Not after Mars." Reyes nodded, swallowing hard. Mars. The name hung between them like a ghost, a wound that hadn't healed. The Dominion had turned the red planet into a graveyard, a warning to humanity to stay down. But humans didn't stay down. They clawed their way back, fueled by rage and loss, and the Retribution was the result. A ship built from the bones of their dead worlds, armed with the fury of a species that refused to forget. The bridge crew didn't question her. They'd all lost something. Families, homes, hope. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning. Far beyond the battlefield, in the glittering spires of the Telleri Collective's capital, panic was spreading. The Psionic Council sat in their crystalline chamber, their minds linked, their thoughts a storm of fear. They'd felt the Retribution's arrival, a psychic shockwave that rippled across the galaxy. Now, as reports trickled in, visuals of the Dominion fleet burning, whispers of a human warship that defied reason, they understood the truth. "They're not stopping," one of the counselors murmured, her voice trembling through the link. "They'll come for us next." "They're animals," another snapped, his mind flashing with disdain. "Primitives with a toy they don't understand." "No," a third voice cut in, older, wiser, heavy with dread. "They understand it perfectly. That's why we should be afraid." The council fell silent, their collective gaze turning toward the stars. The Dominion had been the galaxy's fist, its enforcer. If it fell, what chance did the rest of them have? Back in the void, the Eternal Claw's lights flickered one last time before going dark. Kyle Tor slumped against the console, his strength fading. Through the cracked viewport, he saw the Retribution's fighters closing in, their weapons glowing like the eyes of vengeful gods. He'd underestimated the humans, dismissed them as weak. Now, as the end loomed, he realized his mistake. They weren't weak. They were patient. The final shot came, and the Eternal Claw vanished in a burst of light, taking Kael'tor and his pride with it. The Eternal Claw was gone, its debris scattering across the void like ashes on the wind. The Dominion fleet, or what was left of it, fled in ragged desperation, their hyperspace drives sputtering as the Retribution's fighters hunted them down. One by one, the ships winked out, not into the safety of faster-than-light travel, but into oblivion. The humans didn't pause, didn't relent. Their warship pressed forward, a dark colossus carving a path through the wreckage, its silhouette a promise of ruin. On the Retribution's bridge, Elena Voss watched the carnage unfold, her hands clasped tight behind her back. The tactical display painted a grim picture. Red icons for Dominion ships blinking out, green dots for her fighters swarming like vengeful spirits. Her crew worked in silence, their movements precise, their faces etched with the kind of determination that came from years of buried pain. She didn't need to speak. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about the Dominion. This was about sending a message, one the galaxy wouldn't forget. "Admiral," Reyes said, breaking the quiet. His voice was rough, strained. "Scans show a Dominion outpost 3 light seconds out. Minimal defenses, mostly supply drones and a skeleton crew. Looks like they're trying to evacuate." Elena's eyes flicked to the display, a cold glint in them. "They don't get to run, not this time. Divert a fighter wing. Take it out." Reyes nodded, relaying the order. A dozen green dots peeled off from the main swarm, streaking towards the outpost. Within minutes, the feed showed the result. Explosions blooming across the structure, drones spiraling into the void, the faint flicker of escape pods snuffed out by precise strikes. Elena didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. She'd lived worse. "Ma'am," another officer piped up, a young woman with a scar running down her cheek. "We're picking up chatter from the Telleri. They're broadcasting on open channels, warning their systems about us. They're calling us the Scourge of Sol." A murmur rippled through the bridge, a mix of grim pride and bitter amusement. Elena's lips twitched, the closest she'd come to a smile since this began. "Let them talk," she said. "Let them name us. Fear's a better weapon than any cannon." The officer hesitated, then added, "They're also mobilizing their fleet. Long-range sensors show ships massing near their core worlds." "Good," Elena replied, her voice like steel. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Beyond the Retribution's reach, the galaxy was waking up to the nightmare. In the Vaxuan lattice, crystalline minds hummed with alarm, their harmonic songs fracturing into dissonance. They'd dismissed the humans as fleeting, insignificant, a species too chaotic to endure. Now, their lattice networks pulsed with images of the Retribution, its scarred hull a testament to endurance they couldn't comprehend. The Vaxuan didn't fear easily, but this was different. This was a force that didn't bend, didn't break. It shattered. In the Telleri Collective, the Psionic Council's chamber was a storm of light and sound. Their minds clashed, arguments erupting as they grappled with the impossible. The Dominion was crumbling. Reports confirmed it. Entire battle groups wiped out, outposts reduced to slag, and still the humans advanced. The eldest counselor, Tevara, floated at the center of the chaos, her crystalline form dim with exhaustion. "We must act," a younger counselor insisted, his thoughts sharp with panic. "If we strike now, we can stop them before they reach our borders." "And lose everything," Tevara countered, her voice a low hum through the link. "You've seen their ship, their resolve. This isn't a foe we can outthink. They don't fight for power or glory, they fight for spite." "Then what do we do?" another demanded, his mind flashing with images of burning worlds. Tevara's light pulsed faintly. "We pray they stop at the Dominion, and if they don't, we beg." Back in the void, the Retribution slowed, its engines rumbling as it surveyed the battlefield. The Dominion's resistance was broken, their ships either dust or fleeing into the dark. Elena turned from the display, her gaze settling on a small holo frame on her console, a faded image of a family, smiling under a red Martian sky. Her family. Gone now, like so many others. She touched it briefly, her fingers trembling, then straightened. "Set course for the Dominion's inner systems," she said, her voice steady once more. "We're not done." Reyes looked at her, a flicker of something, concern, maybe, crossing his face. "Ma'am, the crew's been at it for hours. We could stand to—" "No rest," she cut in, her eyes locking with his. Not until they understand. Not until they feel it. He nodded, swallowing his protest. The order went out, and the Retribution surged forward, its fighters falling into formation like a flock of carrion birds. The galaxy watched, breathless, as humanity's wrath bore down on the Dominion's heart. And in the distance, the Telleri fleet stirred, knowing they might be next. The Retribution carved through the void, its engines a low growl that echoed in the bones of its crew. The Dominion's inner systems loomed ahead, a cluster of fortified worlds, their skies bristling with orbital defenses and their surfaces scarred by centuries of conquest. Elena Voss stood at the bridge's heart, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. Red icons swarmed like angry wasps, marking the enemy's last stand. She didn't blink. This was where it ended. "Admiral," Reyes said, his voice taut. "They've got 3 dreadnoughts in orbit around their capital, plus a grid of plasma turrets. It's a kill zone." "Let them try," Elena replied, her tone ice cold. "Charge the main cannon. Target their flagship." The crew snapped to action, hands flying over consoles. The Retribution's core hummed, power surging through its veins as the cannon primed. Outside, the Dominion dreadnoughts turned, their sleek, claw-like hulls glinting in the starlight. They fired first, a barrage of plasma that slammed into the Retribution's shields, lighting them up in a cascade of blue. The ship rocked, but held. "Shields at 80%, the scar-faced officer reported. "They're throwing everything at us." Elena nodded, unfazed. "Return fire." The cannon roared, a beam of molten fury that punched through the lead dreadnought's defenses. The ship split apart, its halves drifting in a cloud of sparks and silence. The other 2 faltered, their formations breaking as the Retribution's fighters swarmed in, tearing at their flanks. On the planet below, the Dominion's leaders watched, their mandibles trembling. They'd never seen defeat, not like this. Aboard one of the surviving dreadnoughts, Commander Zeth Kar clung to his command post, his 4 eyes wide with terror. The humans weren't slowing. Their ship absorbed punishment that should have crippled it, their fighters struck with a precision that defied logic. He'd heard the stories, Earth's colonies burning, their pleas ignored. He'd laughed then, called it a cull of the weak. Now he understood. They weren't weak, they were relentless. "Signal surrender!" Zeth Kar barked, his voice cracking. "Tell them we yield." His comms officer hesitated. "Sir, they're not answering. They're—" The words died as the Retribution's cannon fired again. The second dreadnought vanished in a flash of light, and Zeth Kar's ship shuddered under a hail of fighter strikes. He fell to his knees, the deck splitting beneath him. This wasn't war. This was judgment. On the Retribution, Elena watched the 3rd dreadnought burn, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. Satisfaction, maybe, or the ghost of grief. The planet's defenses flickered, overwhelmed. She turned to Reyes. "Prepare the landing teams. We finish this on the ground." He nodded, but his eyes held a question he didn't voice. How far would she go? How much was enough? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. The Retribution descended, a shadow over the Dominion's capital, and the galaxy held its breath. The Retribution hung low over the Dominion's capital world, its shadow swallowing the spires of Kavren Prime. The planet's surface was a jagged tapestry of steel and stone, its cities built from the bones of conquered worlds, its skies once thick with the arrogance of unchallenged rule. Now, those skies burned. The orbital defenses were gone, reduced to smoldering wrecks by the Retribution's relentless barrage. The last dreadnought had crashed into the eastern wastes, a twisted monument to the Dominion's fall. And still, the humans weren't done. Elena Voss stood at the edge of the deployment bay, her boots ringing against the metal deck as dropships roared to life behind her. The air was thick with the tang of fuel and the low hum of anticipation. Soldiers moved in disciplined silence, their armor scarred and patched, their rifles gleaming with cold purpose. These weren't the polished troops of a galactic empire. They were survivors, forged in the ashes of Earth's lost colonies, their faces hard with the weight of memory. "Landing team's ready, ma'am," Reyes said, stepping up beside her. His prosthetic arm whirred faintly as he adjusted his helmet. "We've got 3 targets: their command citadel, the industrial core, and their civilian evacuation zone." Elena's jaw tightened. "No civilians," she said, her voice low but firm. "They don't get to hide behind their innocence. Focus on the citadel and the core. Burn their power to the ground." Reyes nodded, though his eyes flickered with something unspoken. He'd followed her this far, through the void, through the fire, but the line between justice and slaughter was blurring, and he felt it. They all did. Still, no one argued. The dropships launched, engines flaring as they descended through the smoke-choked atmosphere, carrying humanity's wrath to the surface. Below the Dominion's capital was a hive of chaos. The streets teemed with Kavren soldiers and civilians alike, their mandibles clicking in frantic terror. The High Council had barricaded themselves in the citadel, a towering fortress of black stone and shimmering shields. They'd sent pleas across the galaxy, begging the Telleri, the Vaxuan, anyone to intervene. No one answered. The galaxy watched, silent and afraid, as the humans closed in. Commander Zethkar had survived his ship's destruction, dragged from the wreckage by a loyal squad. Now he stood atop the citadel's ramparts, his armor cracked, his breath ragged. The horizon glowed with the fires of fallen outposts, and above, the retribution loomed like a god of death. He'd mocked the humans once, called them vermin. Now he saw the truth. They were a force of nature, unstoppable, unbreakable. "They're landing," a subordinate rasped, pointing to the dropships breaking through the clouds. "We can't hold them." "We will," Zethkar snarled, clutching his plasma lance. "This is our world, our legacy. We fight to the last." The first dropship touched down, its ramp slamming open. Human soldiers poured out, their movements swift and brutal. Plasma fire met them, cutting down a few, but they pressed on, relentless. Grenades flashed, tearing through Dominion lines, and the air filled with the screams of the dying. Zethkar charged, his lance blazing, but a human met him. Reyes, his prosthetic arm slamming into Zethkar's chest with bone-crushing force. The commander fell, gasping, as Reyes loomed over him. "This is for Mars," Reyes growled, and drove his blade through Zethkar's heart. Above, Elena watched the feed from the Retribution's bridge, her expression unreadable. The Citadel's shields flickered under artillery fire, the industrial core erupting in plumes of flame. Her soldiers were a tide, washing over the Dominion's defenses, leaving nothing but ruin. She should have felt triumph, but all she felt was the hollow ache of a debt still unpaid. "Admiral," the scar-faced officer said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The Telleri fleet's on the move. They're coming for us." Elena turned, her eyes narrowing. "Let them. We'll be waiting." The ground shook as the citadel began to crumble, and in the distance, the Telleri ships blinked into hyperspace, racing toward their reckoning. The citadel of Kavren Prime fell in a roar of dust and fire, its black stone walls collapsing under the Retribution's orbital strikes. On the ground, human soldiers moved through the wreckage, their boots crunching over shattered Dominion banners. Reyes stood amidst the chaos, his blade dripping with ichor, the body of Zethkar cooling at his feet. The air was thick with smoke and the wails of the defeated, but he felt no victory, only the weight of a promise kept, and a war still unfinished. Above, Elena Voss paced the Retribution's bridge, her eyes on the tactical display. The Dominion's capital was a smoldering ruin, its power broken, its people scattered. But the scar-faced officer's warning echoed in her mind. The Tellurai were coming. Their fleet, sleek, shimmering cutters powered by psionic energy, had jumped into hyperspace, their course set for Kavren Prime. They weren't here to save the Dominion. They were here to stop the humans before the Retribution turned its gaze on them. "Time to intercept?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. 2 hours, the officer replied, her scarred cheek twitching. "They're fast, ma'am. Faster than anything we've faced." "Then we hit them harder," Elena said, turning to Reyes as he stepped onto the bridge, his armor streaked with ash. "Ground ops are done?" "Done," he confirmed, his voice rough. "The Dominion's finished here. What's next?" Elena pointed to the display, where green dots marked the Retribution and red ones pulsed for the approaching Tellurai. "They think they can stop us. We prove them wrong." Reyes nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of doubt. "We're stretched thin, Elena. The crew's exhausted. We've been fighting non-stop since—" "No rest," she cut him off, her tone sharp. "Not until they all pay." He didn't argue, but the silence between them spoke volumes. The crew felt it too. The edge they were teetering on, the line between justice and obsession. Still, they obeyed. The Retribution's engines flared, repositioning to face the incoming threat, its fighters recalled to rearm and refuel. Far off, in the Tellurai fleet's lead ship, Counselor Tevara floated in her command sphere, her crystalline form pulsing with resolve. The humans were a plague, a wildfire that had to be contained. She'd seen the feeds, Kavren Prime burning, the Dominion's might reduced to ash. The galaxy couldn't survive this storm unchecked. "Engage as soon as we exit hyperspace," she ordered, her thoughts rippling through the fleet's psionic link. "Target their ship. End this." The Tellurai ships emerged in a flash of light, their cutters gleaming like shards of glass against the void. The Retribution waited, its cannon charging, its crew braced. Elena clenched her fists, the hollow frame of her lost family glinting in the corner of her eye. "Fire," she whispered, and the galaxy braced for the clash. The void erupted as the Tellurai fleet met the Retribution. Their cutters streaked forward, beams of psionic energy lashing out, slicing through space with surgical precision. The Retribution's shields flared under the assault, blue arcs crackling across its scarred hull. Elena Voss stood rigid on the bridge, her eyes locked on the tactical display as red and green icons danced in a deadly ballet. The Tellurai were fast, their attacks coordinated through their psychic link, but the humans had something they didn't: raw, unyielding fury. "Main cannon now!" Elena barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The Retribution shuddered as its cannon unleashed a torrent of light, slamming into the lead Tellurai cutter. The ship shattered, its crystalline hull fracturing into a million glittering shards. The fleet faltered, their psionic harmony disrupted by the loss, and the Retribution's fighters seized the moment, swarming the gaps with relentless strikes. Explosions bloomed silently in the dark, each one a testament to humanity's refusal to yield. Aboard her command sphere, Tevara recoiled, her light dimming as the psychic backlash hit. She felt every death, every ship lost, a scream in her mind. The humans weren't just fighting, they were tearing through her fleet like a beast unleashed. "Focus fire," she commanded, her thoughts sharp with desperation. "Destroy their ship." The Tellurai rallied, their beams converging on the Retribution. The shields buckled, dropping to 30%, and the bridge rocked, consoles sparking. Reyes grabbed the railing, his prosthetic arm straining. "We can't take much more, Elena." "We don't have to," she shot back, her voice fierce. "Target their core ship. End this." The cannon charged again, slower this time, the ship's systems straining. The Telleri pressed their advantage, their cutters circling like predators. But the humans didn't break. The Retribution fired, the beam piercing Tevara's sphere. Her scream echoed through the psionic link as her ship exploded, silencing the fleet's unity. The remaining cutters scattered, leaderless, and the Retribution hunted them down, one by one. When the last Telleri ship burned out, silence fell. The bridge was dim, the crew battered but alive. Elena sank into her chair, her hands trembling as she touched the hollow frame of her family. The Dominion was broken, the Telleri humbled. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, what it would do, when pushed too far. "Ma'am," the scar-faced officer said softly, "no more signals." They're afraid." Elena nodded, her chest tight. "Good. Let them be." Reyes approached, his voice low. "Is it enough?" She looked at him, then at the stars beyond the viewport, stars that had once burned her worlds. "For now," she whispered. The Retribution turned, its engines rumbling, a shadow of vengeance fading into the void. The galaxy stood frozen, not in fear now, but in awe. Humanity had spoken, and its voice was thunder. The sky was bleeding red when Kale Vorsh first realized he'd made a deal with the devil. Not the horned kind from old Earth tales, mind you, but something far worse. Humanity itself. He stood on the jagged cliffs of Zera 9, a backwater planet so far from the galactic core it didn't even have a proper name until the humans showed up and started carving their messy fingerprints into its crust. The wind howled, tugging at his tattered coat. And below him, the ocean churned black and furious, as if it knew what he'd done, what he'd asked for. It started 6 months ago, back when Kyle was just another nobody in the sprawl of the Outer Rim. A scavenger, a drifter, a gray-skinned Zainari with too many scars and not enough credits to keep his ship's engines humming. The humans had rolled into port like they owned it, loud, brash, and spilling out of their patched-up freighters with grins that promised trouble. Kyle hated them on sight. Everyone did. They were the galaxy's cockroaches, adaptable, relentless, and impossible to kill off no matter how many wars or plagues the universe threw at them. But they had something no one else did: numbers and guts, and a knack for turning scraps into miracles. He'd been desperate that day, though. His sister, Lyra, was dying. Some rot from a bad salvage run had crept into her lungs, and the med drones couldn't fix her without a rare isotope that cost more than Kale could scrape together in 10 lifetimes. So when the human captain, some wiry bastard named Decker with a crooked nose and a laugh like a broken engine, offered him a deal, Kyle didn't hesitate. "Save her," he'd said, voice cracking. "I don't care how. Just save her and I'll owe you one." Decker's grin had widened. "Careful what you wish for, friend. Humanity's favors come with teeth." Kale didn't care about the teeth then. He cared about Lyra's shallow breaths, the way her 6-fingered hands twitched against the cot. The humans delivered. They raided some pirate stash, cracked open a derelict station, and came back with the isotope like it was nothing. Lyra lived. Kyle wept, and Decker just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "We'll call you when we need you." 6 months later, that call came. And now here he was, on Zera 9, staring down a nightmare he couldn't unsee. The humans had built something. Not a city, not a ship, but a machine. It sprawled across the valley below the cliffs, a grotesque tangle of metal and pulsing lights that looked alive in all the wrong ways. Towers stabbed into the sky, spitting sparks and smoke, while tendrils of wire and alloy snaked across the ground like veins. Kyle's sharp Zynery eyes picked out the details. Human workers scrambling over it like ants, their shouts carrying faintly on the wind. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was wrong. The air tasted sour, and his gut twisted with a dread he couldn't name. Decker was waiting for him at the edge of the cliff, leaning against a rusted skiff with that same damn grin. "You're late," he said, tossing Kyle a canteen of something that smelled like fuel and regret. "Thought you'd skip out on us." "What is that thing?" Kyle rasped, ignoring the canteen. His voice was rough from disuse. He hadn't spoken to anyone since Lyra recovered and told him to stop hovering. Decker's grin faltered, just for a second. "That's the favor, friend. The impossible. You're gonna help us turn it on." Kyle's blood went cold. "Turn it on? What does it do?" "Changes everything," Decker said, his eyes glinting with something manic. "We found a signal, see? Old. Older than your kind, older than mine. Buried in the bones of this rock. Took us years to dig it up, decades to build this beast. It's a gate, Kale. A gate to somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" Kale's mind reeled. The humans were insane. Everyone knew that. But this? This was beyond madness. "You don't even know where it goes?" "Nope," Decker said, popping the word like it was a joke. "But we're going anyway, and you're coming with us." Kyle took a step back, his boots crunching on loose gravel. "I didn't sign up for this. I owed you a favor, not my life." Decker's laugh was sharp and ugly. "You think you get to pick? You said save her, and we did. Now it's our turn. Humanity doesn't do half measures, Vorsh. You're in this whether you like it or not." The wind screamed louder, and down in the valley the machine groaned, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through Kyle's bones. He thought of Lyra, safe back on the rim, breathing easy because of these lunatics. He thought of running, of jumping into the Black Sea and letting it swallow him whole. But Decker's hand was on his shoulder now, firm and unyielding, steering him toward the skiff. "Time to see what we're made of," Decker said. And Kyle realized with a sick lurch that he wasn't just talking about the humans. The skiff rattled as it descended into the valley, its engines coughing like they resented the journey as much as Kale did. He gripped the edge of his seat, claws digging into the worn metal, while Decker hummed a tuneless song beside him. The human's casual swagger was infuriating. Didn't he feel the weight of this? The machine loomed larger with every shuddering drop, its jagged silhouette blotting out the crimson sky. Up close, it was worse than Kale had imagined. The air buzzed with static, and the ground trembled faintly, as if the planet itself was trying to shake off this monstrosity. They landed hard near a cluster of human workers, all sweat-streaked and shouting over the machine's relentless hum. Decker hopped out first, boots kicking up dust, and waved Kyle after him like they were old pals heading to a bar. "Come on, Vorsh. You'll want a front-row seat for this." Kyle didn't move. His eyes were locked on the machine's core. A massive, glowing orb suspended in a web of cables, pulsing like a dying star. It hurt to look at, a deep ache behind his sockets that made him want to claw his own face off. "What's powering it?" he asked, voice barely audible over the noise. Decker glanced back, his grin twitching. "You don't want to know." That was the moment Kale's dread turned to something sharper. Anger. He slid out of the skiff, stalking after Decker with fists clenched. "No more games! You dragged me here! Tell me what I'm part of!" The human stopped, turning to face him fully. For once, the grin was gone, replaced by something harder, colder. "All right then. It's a relic, Coil. Something the galaxy forgot, or tried to. We think it's a jump gate, but not the kind we're used to. Not ships, not cargo. Consciousness. Souls, maybe. Whatever you call it when you strip a mind bare and fling it somewhere else. Kale's stomach lurched. You're experimenting with minds? And you don't even know where they'll go? We've got theories, Decker said, shrugging like it was nothing. Point is, it's a chance. Humanity's been clawing at the edges of this universe for centuries. Wars, colonies, scraps. We're tired of surviving. This could be ascension, or annihilation. Either way, it's ours. And me? Kale snapped. What am I here for? Decker's eyes flicked to the orb, then back to Kale. You're the key, friend. Zynari brains, your neural patterns, they're different. Stable where ours fry. We've lost 6 test runs already. Volunteers, mostly. They come back wrong or not at all. But you might actually make it. The words hit like a punch. Kyle staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. You're insane. You want to shove me into that thing? Not shove, Decker said, stepping closer. Ask. You owe us, remember? Lyra's alive because we pulled off the impossible. Now it's your turn. Kyle's mind spun. He saw Lyra's face, pale and fragile, then flushed with life again after the humans saved her. He saw the pirate stash they'd raided, the risks they'd taken. And now this. A favor wasn't supposed to be a death sentence. You lied to me, he hissed. You knew what you'd ask. Decker didn't flinch. I told you it'd have teeth. Before Kale could answer, a scream cut through the air. Not human, not Zenari, but something raw and wrong. It came from the machine. The workers froze, tools clattering to the ground, and the orb's glow flared brighter, casting long, twisted shadows. Kyle's skin prickled as a voice, not a sound, but a feeling, slithered into his skull. Help us, it whispered. Free us, he stumbled, clutching his head. Decker grabbed his arm, steadying him. You hear it, don't you? The human said, excitement bleeding into his voice. It's waking up, and it knows you're here. Kyle yanked free, his heart hammering. What's trapped in there? No clue, Decker admitted. But it's been waiting a long time, and it's pissed. The ground shuddered again, harder this time, and cracks splintered through the dirt. The workers shouted, scrambling back as the machine's tendrils twitched like living things. Kyle's instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far from this place as possible, but Decker's grip was back on his shoulder, unyielding. We're activating it tonight, Decker said, with or without you. But if you walk away, Lyra's debt stays unpaid. Think about that. Kale's vision blurred with rage and fear. He thought of Lyra, safe and oblivious, and the humans who'd turned her survival into a noose around his neck. He thought of that voice, pleading and furious, trapped in a machine built by madmen. And he realized, with a sick, sinking clarity, that he was already caught. Whether he stepped into the orb or not, humanity had claimed him. The sky darkened as the machine roared louder, and Kyle knew the impossible was coming for him, one way or another. The air thickened as night fell over Zera 9, the red sky swallowed by a suffocating black. The machine's hum had grown into a pulse, a heartbeat that thrummed through Kale's chest and rattled his teeth. He stood at the edge of the chaos, watching the humans swarm like insects drawn to a flame. They hauled cables, barked orders, and ignored the cracks splitting the ground beneath their feet. Decker was gone, vanished into the crowd to oversee whatever madness they were about to unleash. But his words lingered like a blade in Kyle's gut. If you walk away, Lyra's debt stays unpaid. He could still feel the voice from the orb, slithering through his thoughts. Help us. Free us. It wasn't just a plea anymore. It was a demand, sharp and insistent, clawing at the edges of his sanity. His Zynari senses, honed from years scavenging the rim's dead zones, picked up something the humans couldn't. A dissonance in the air. A wrongness that went beyond the machine's grotesque sprawl. Whatever was trapped inside wasn't just alive. It was aware. and it hated. A hand brushed his arm, startling him. He whirled, claws out, only to find a human woman staring up at him. She was small, wiry, with grease-streaked cheeks and eyes that looked too old for her face. "You're the Zenari," she said, voice low. "Decker's pet project." Kyle bristled. "I'm no one's pet," she snorted, glancing at the orb. "Could have fooled me. Name's Mara. I'm the one who keeps this heap running, or tries to. You hear it too, don't you? The screaming?" He hesitated, then nodded. "What is it?" Mara's lips thinned. "Don't know. Don't want to. But it's been getting louder since we started digging. Used to be whispers. Now it's like a damn chorus. Decker thinks it's a breakthrough. I think it's a warning." Kyle's gaze flicked to the orb, its glow now a sickly green that pulsed in time with the voice in his head. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not one of them," she said, jerking her chin at the workers. "You're not drunk on their dreams. Maybe you'll listen when I say we should stop." "Stop?" Kyle laughed, bitter and hollow. "Decker's got me by the throat. I don't get a vote." Mara's eyes darkened. "You don't get it. None of us do. Not really. I've seen the test logs. The ones who went in before you. They didn't just die, Vorsh. They came back wrong. Talking in tongues, clawing at their own skin. One of them begged me to kill him. Said he saw the other side and it was hungry." Kyle's stomach twisted. He wanted to dismiss her, to call it human exaggeration, but the fear in her voice was real, and that voice in his head, it wasn't begging anymore. It was pushing, testing the cracks in his resolve. "You owe them nothing," it hissed. "Break it! Break them!" Before he could respond, a klaxon blared, cutting through the noise. The workers scattered, clearing a path as Decker strode back into view, flanked by two burly humans in patched armor. His grin was back, wider than ever. "Showtime, Vorsh! We're firing her up!" Mara cursed under her breath and slipped away, vanishing into the shadows. Kyle didn't have time to process her warning. Decker was on him, clapping a hand on his back like they were brothers. "Come on, hero. Let's make history." The machine roared, a sound so deep it shook the ground, and the orb flared blindingly bright. Kyle felt it then, a pull like invisible hands dragging at his mind. The voice surged, deafening now. "Free us!" it screamed, and Kyle stumbled, clutching his head as pain lanced through him. Decker laughed, oblivious. "That's it. You're sinking. Get him in there." The armored humans grabbed Kyle, dragging him toward a platform rigged with wires and restraints. He thrashed, claws raking at their suits, but they were stronger, fueled by that reckless human fire. The platform rose, lifting him toward the orb, and the world blurred as the voice drowned out everything else. "You can stop this," it whispered, softer now, insidious. "You can end them." Kyle's vision swam, and he saw Lyra's face, alive, smiling, then Decker's grin, smug and triumphant. The orb loomed closer, its light searing his skin, and he realized with a sick jolt that he wasn't just a key. He was a sacrifice. And the thing inside knew it too. The platform jolted to a stop, suspending Kale inches from the orb's pulsing surface. Its light burned through his closed eyelids, a sickly green that clawed at his senses. The voice was everywhere now, inside his skull, his veins, his bones, screaming, "Free us!" with a fury that made his blood run cold. The restraints bit into his wrists as he thrashed, but the humans below didn't care. Decker's voice crackled through a calm, sharp and gleeful. "Hold steady, Vorsh. You're about to be a legend." Kyle's claws scraped uselessly against the metal. He wasn't a legend. He was prey. The orb's pull grew stronger, a tidal force yanking at his mind, and he felt himself fraying, threads of thought unraveling into the void. Memories flashed. Lyra's laugh, the rim's dust-choked skies, the day he'd begged the humans for help. He'd traded her life for this, and now they'd turned his debt into a death sentence. Down below, the machine groaned, tendrils twitching as sparks rained from its towers. The workers cheered, oblivious to the cracks widening in the earth. Kyle's sharp Zainari eyes caught Mara in the chaos, her face pale as she wrestled with a control panel, muttering curses. She'd warned him, but it was too late. The voice surged again, softer now, cunning. "They betray you. Break them." He froze. The words weren't just noise. They were a choice. His rage flared hot and jagged at Decker, at humanity, at the trap he'd walked into. The orb pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and for a moment he saw it. A vision of the machine collapsing, the humans screaming, the valley swallowed in fire. It could happen. He could make it happen. "Vorsh!" Decker's shout snapped him back. "We're at threshold. You're in!" The platform lurched, and the orb's surface rippled like liquid, inches from his face. Kyle's scream caught in his throat as the light swallowed him whole. Pain exploded, sharp, infinite. Then silence. He was nowhere, floating in a black expanse, weightless and alone. No, not alone. Shapes moved in the dark, vague, writhing forms that whispered in 1,000 voices. "You're here," they said. "You're ours." Panic clawed at him, but his body wouldn't respond. He was a mind without a shell, trapped with whatever this machine had caged. The shapes drew closer, their whispers turning to shrieks, and Cale felt them probing, peeling at his thoughts. "Help us," they begged. "End them." He saw Lyra again, safe and alive, and Decker's grin, smug and cruel. The humans had used him, but these things, they wanted more. They wanted out, and he was the door. A jolt ripped through him, and suddenly he was back, gasping on the platform, the orb still blazing. Decker's voice crackled. "It worked! He's linked!" Kyle's hands shook as the restraints loosened. The voices lingered, watching, waiting. Kyle's hands trembled as the restraints fell away, clattering against the platform with a hollow clang. The orb loomed above him, its glow dimmer now, but still alive. Watching. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one tasting of ash and static, and his skin prickled with the memory of that black expanse. The voices hadn't left him. They coiled in his mind like smoke, whispering, pleading, threatening. "You're ours. Free us. End them." He pressed his palms to his temples, trying to force them out, but they clung tighter, their presence a weight he couldn't shake. Below, the valley was a storm of noise and motion. The machine's pulse had steadied, a low thrum that vibrated through the cracked earth, and the humans were shouting, laughing, slapping each other's backs like they'd conquered the stars. Decker's voice boomed over the comm again, sharp and triumphant. "We've got a signal! It's stabilizing! Vorsh, you beautiful bastard, you did it!" Kyle didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a wound, raw and bleeding, his mind split between the here and now and that endless dark where the voices lived. His claws flexed, itching to tear into something. Decker, the machine, himself, anything to stop the chaos clawing at him. He staggered to his feet, legs unsteady, and peered over the platform's edge. The workers swarmed below, their faces lit with a manic glee that turned his stomach. They didn't see it. The way the tendrils twitched, the way the air shimmered with something unseen. They didn't hear the voices, but Mara did. He spotted her near the control rig, her hands frozen on the levers, her eyes locked on him. She'd felt it too, the wrongness, the hunger. Their gazes met, and for a moment he saw it. Fear, yes, but also a flicker of defiance. She shook her head, a tiny, desperate motion, and mouthed one word. "Stop." The platform began to lower, creaking as it descended toward the chaos. Kyle's heart pounded, each beat a hammer against his ribs. The voices surged, louder now, a chorus of rage and despair. They used you. They'll use us. Break them. He stumbled, catching himself on the railing, and the vision flashed again. The machine in ruins, the valley aflame, the humans screaming. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Decker was waiting when the platform hit the ground, his grin wide enough to split his face. "You're a miracle, Vorsh! We're reading energy spikes off the charts. Whatever's on the other side, it's waking up!" He clapped Kyle's shoulder, oblivious to the way Kyle flinched, the way his claws twitched toward the human's throat. "What's on the other side?" Kyle rasped, voice rough as gravel. "You don't even know." Decker laughed, a sound that grated like broken glass. "That's the fun of it. Could be gods, could be monsters, could be nothing, but it's ours now, humanity's ticket to the big leagues." Kyle's gut twisted. He saw Lyra's face again, alive because of these madmen, and felt the debt like chains. But the voices pressed harder, their whispers turning to snarls. "They'll destroy everything. You can save her. Break it." He glanced at Mara, still at the controls, her hands trembling now. She caught his eye again, and this time she nodded, just once, sharp and certain. She'd do it. She'd shut it down. But the machine was alive, its tendrils curling toward the orb like fingers, and Coyle knew it wouldn't let go easily. Decker turned away, barking orders, and Coyle's hand hovered over the platform's edge. The voices roared, a tidal wave crashing through him. "Now!" they screamed, and he felt it. The power, the choice. He could end this. He could rip the machine apart, let the voices loose and watch humanity burn, or he could fight them, hold the line, and pray the humans were right. The ground shook, a deep rumble that sent workers stumbling. The orb flared, bright and furious, and Cale's vision blurred as the voices clawed deeper. "Free us!" they howled, and he saw it again. Lyra, safe, then gone, swallowed by the fire he could unleash. Mara's voice cut through, faint but fierce. "Vorsh, now!" His claws dug into the metal, tearing grooves. He had seconds, maybe less. The metal groaned under Kyle's claws as he stood frozen, the world narrowing to the scream of the voices and the shuddering earth. "Free us!" they roared, a storm of fury and desperation that drowned out everything else. His vision flickered. Lyra's smile, Decker's grin, the valley in flames, and his body trembled with the weight of it. Mara's shout still echoed in his ears, sharp and urgent. Now, she was at the controls, her hands slamming levers, her face a mask of grim resolve. But the machine wasn't yielding. Its tendrils lashed out, snaking toward her, and the orb pulsed with a light so fierce it burned shadows into the dirt. Kyle's breath hitched. He could feel the voices' hunger, their rage, pressing against his skull like a vice. They weren't just trapped. They were starving, and he was their way out. His claws twitched, itching to tear into the platform, the orb, anything to silence them. But then he saw her, Mara, dodging a tendril as it smashed into the control rig, sparks flying. She wasn't like Decker. She wasn't drunk on humanity's reckless dreams. She was fighting to stop this, and she needed him. The ground bucked again, harder, and a crack split the valley floor, swallowing a worker whole. Screams erupted, the human's triumph turning to panic as the machine writhed like a living thing. Decker's voice cut through the chaos, furious now. "Vorsh, get back up there! We're losing it!" Kyle's head snapped toward him. Decker stood at the base of a tower, waving wildly, his grin replaced by a snarl. The human didn't see it. The way the orb's light pulsed in time with the voices, the way the air thickened with something ancient and vengeful. He didn't care. To him, Kyle was just a tool, a debt to be cashed in. The voices seized the moment, their whispers turning to a command. "Break it!" they thundered, and Kale's hands moved before he could think, claws slashing at the platform's wiring. Sparks flew, and the machine shrieked, a sound that wasn't metal or tech but something alive, wounded. The orb dimmed just for a second, and the voices howled in triumph. "Yes, more!" But then he stopped. His claws hovered, trembling, as Lyra's face flashed again, alive, safe, because of these humans. If he broke it, if he let the voices out, what would happen to her? To the rim? To everything? Mara's cry snapped him back. A tendril had her pinned, coiling around her leg, dragging her toward the orb. She clawed at the ground, her tools scattered, her defiance crumbling into terror. "Vorsh!" she screamed, and the sound cut deeper than the voices ever could. Kyle moved. He leapt from the platform, hitting the ground hard, and charged toward her. The tendrils lashed out, but his Zenari reflexes were sharper, honed by years of survival. He slashed at the metal, severing the coil around Mara's leg, and hauled her free. She gasped, clutching his arm, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and gratitude. "It's not stopping," she rasped, pointing at the orb. "We're too late." The light flared again, brighter, and the voices surged, no longer pleading but commanding. "You can't hold us!" they roared, and Kyle felt it. A shift, a tearing in his mind. The orb cracked, a hairline fracture spidering across its surface, and the air split with a sound like 1,000 breaking bones. Decker was on them in an instant, shoving through the chaos. "What did you do?" he bellowed, grabbing Kyle's coat. "You're ruining it!" Kyle shoved him back, claws bared. "You ruined it! You don't even know what you've woken!" The human's face twisted, rage and desperation warring in his eyes. "We're so close! You owe us this!" "I owe you nothing!" Kale snarled, and for the first time, he believed it. The machine screamed again, louder, and the crack in the orb widened. Something moved inside, dark, vast, and alive. The voices laughed, a sound that chilled Kale's blood. "Too late," they whispered, and the ground began to collapse. The valley was dying. The ground split wider, jagged fissures swallowing dirt and metal as the machine convulsed like a beast in its death throes. The orb's crack yawned open, spilling a darkness that wasn't just shadow. It moved, pulsed, reached. The voices weren't whispers anymore. They were a cacophony, a tidal wave of glee and malice that crashed through Kyle's mind. "Free! Free at last!" They shrieked, and he stumbled, clutching his head as the sound threatened to split him apart. Mara clung to his arm, her breath ragged, her leg bleeding where the tendril had crushed it. "We have to run!" she gasped, pulling at him. "It's over!" But Kale couldn't move. His eyes were locked on the orb, on the thing emerging from it. Formless yet alive, a writhing mass of intent that sucked the light from the air. The humans scattered. Their cheers turned to wails as the tendrils lashed out blindly, smashing bodies and machinery alike. Decker stood his ground, though, screaming into a calm, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Hold the line! We can still control it!" Control it? Kale's laugh was bitter, choked. The humans had never controlled this. They'd poked a sleeping god and called it progress. And he'd been their key, their pawn, dragged into this nightmare because of a favor he couldn't repay. The voices seized his rage, twisting it. They did this. End them! He saw it again. The valley in flames, Decker's smug grin erased, humanity's arrogance reduced to ash. His claws flexed, and for a heartbeat, he wanted it. Wanted them gone. But then Mara's grip tightened, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Vorsh, don't! You're not them!" Her words hit like a slap, and he blinked, the vision fading. She was right. He wasn't human. He wasn't reckless. wasn't blind. He was Zainari, a survivor, and he wouldn't let these voices turn him into their weapon. Not for revenge. Not for anything. The orb shattered fully then, a deafening crack that sent shards flying. The darkness poured out, coalescing into shapes, vague, towering figures that loomed over the valley. The air grew heavy, suffocating, and the voices roared in triumph. "We are here!" they bellowed, and Kyle felt their gaze, cold, endless, and ravenous, fix on him. Decker charged forward, shoving past fleeing workers, a plasma torch in hand. "Vorsh, get back to the platform! We can seal it!" His eyes were wild, desperate, clinging to a dream that was already dead. Kyle shoved Mara behind him, facing Decker. "It's done, you fool! You've killed us all!" "Not yet!" Decker snarled, lunging at him. Kyle sidestepped, claws slashing, and Decker hit the ground hard, blood welling from his arm. He didn't stay down, though. Humans never did. He staggered up, torch flaring, and swung again. The dark shapes moved closer, their presence a pressure that crushed the breath from Kyle's lungs. The machine's towers buckled, collapsing in showers of sparks, and the ground heaved, throwing them both off balance. Mara screamed as a fissure opened beneath her, and Kyle dove, grabbing her wrist just as she slipped over the edge. Her weight yanked at him, his claws scrabbling for purchase on the crumbling dirt. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice raw. Her eyes met his, wide and terrified, but she nodded, clinging to him with all she had. Decker loomed over them, torch raised. "You're wasting time, we can still—" A tendril struck, fast and brutal, piercing Decker's chest. His words cut off in a gurgle, his body jerking as the metal coiled and yanked him into the air. Kyle stared, frozen, as the human's torch fell, sizzling in the dust. Decker's eyes locked on his, pleading for a moment, then went dark. The voices laughed, a sound that shook the sky. "One down," they purred. More to come. Kyle hauled Mara up, his arms burning, and they stumbled back as the dark shapes descended, their forms sharpening. Claws, eyes, hunger made real. The valley was lost, and Kale knew with a sick certainty that this was only the beginning. The valley was a graveyard now, a jagged wound in Zyra 9's crust where the machine had once stood. Its towers were rubble, its tendrils limp and lifeless, but the air still thrummed with the presence of the things that had broken free. They towered over the wreckage, dark, shifting figures with claws like blades, and eyes that burned with a cold, endless hunger. The voices weren't in Kyle's head anymore. They were everywhere, a chorus of triumph and malice that echoed off the cliffs. "We are here," they sang, and the ground trembled with their steps. Kyle dragged Mara through the chaos, his claws digging into her arm as he pulled her over shattered metal and broken earth. Her leg dragged uselessly, blood soaking her pant leg, but she didn't complain, just gritted her teeth and kept moving. The humans who'd survived were fleeing, their bravado shattered, their shouts swallowed by the wind. Decker's body lay somewhere behind them, a crumpled testament to humanity's hubris, and Kale felt no pity. The bastard had gambled with the galaxy and lost. But the victory wasn't Kale's either. The things, the entities, were loose, and they weren't stopping. He could feel their gaze, heavy and predatory, tracking him as he stumbled toward the cliffs. Mara's breath came in shallow gasps, her strength fading, and Kyle's own body screamed with exhaustion. His Zenari endurance was all that kept him upright, but even that was fraying. "We can't outrun them," Mara rasped, her voice barely audible over the entity's low, guttural hum. She pointed with a trembling hand toward the skiff, half buried under debris near the valley's edge. "There, if it still works." Kyle didn't waste breath replying. He hauled her toward it, shoving aside twisted metal with a strength born of desperation. The entities moved closer, their forms solidifying, hulking insect-like shapes with too many limbs and mouths that gaped like wounds. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as if they devoured everything they touched. The skiff's hatch was dented but intact. Kyle pried it open, his claws screeching against the steel, and shoved Mara inside. She collapsed onto the floor, clutching her leg, while he scrambled to the controls. The console flickered, sparking under his hands, and for a moment he thought it was dead. Then the engines coughed. A weak, stuttering roar, and the skiff lurched upward. The entities lunged, claws raking the hull, and Coyle slammed the throttle. The skiff shot forward, weaving through the valley as the things pursued, their hum rising to a shriek. Mara dragged herself to a seat, her face pale but fierce. "Head for the cliffs," she said. "There's a relay station. Might get a signal out." Kyle nodded, his jaw tight. The skiff rattled, its frame groaning under the strain, but it held. The cliffs loomed ahead, stark against the black sky, and he aimed for a narrow ledge where a rusted antenna jutted out. The entities were gaining, their claws slashing the air, and Cale felt their hunger, a void that wanted to swallow him whole. The skiff hit the ledge hard, skidding to a stop. Kyle leapt out, dragging Mara with him, and stumbled to the relay. It was ancient, half-fried, but its lights blinked faintly. Mara crawled to it, her hands shaking as she punched in a distress code. "Rim's close enough," she muttered. "Someone'll hear." The entities reached the base of the cliffs, their forms towering, unstoppable. Kyle turned to face them, claws bared, knowing it was futile. But then the relay beeped, a sharp, clear sound, and a voice crackled through. "Zenari, not human." "This is Outpost 7. Identify." "Lyra," Kyle whispered, his heart lurching. He grabbed the comm. "Kyle Vorsh, Zenari. 09's gone. Entities loose. Send everything you've got." The line hissed, then, "Hold on." "Fleet's en route." The entities climbed, their claws gouging the rock, and Cale pulled Mara back, shielding her. The skiff was trashed, the valley lost, but the signal was out. Lyra would live. The Rim might stand a chance. The first entity crested the ledge, its eyes locking on Kyle, and the voices spoke one last time, not in his head but aloud, a promise that chilled his blood. "This is not the end." He braced himself, claws ready, as the sky lit up with the distant glow of ships. Humanity had opened the door, but Cale would fight to close it, or die trying.